Welcome to Kramer Talk podcast, another episode. We're here to talk about not necessarily technology, but technology may drive transformation, but people drive technology. And Kramer Talk is where that story is told. One of my good peer friends, Charles Brennan, has decided to join me today. How you doing, Charles? It's good to see you. I haven't seen you probably in a month or so. I miss hanging out. We see each other at all these great events. We get to kind of collaborate a little bit, and it's a lot of fun. So how are you doing?
Robert, it's amazing to be here today, and it's always a pleasure getting to talk to you. Well, it has been quite some time, but things have been busy. But like I said, I'm super happy to be here today to talk about the people aspect of it. What you said is super important, right? Because the technology matters, but it all comes down to people adopting that technology and really driving change within their companies. And we are really fortunate to be in a position where having the experience now talk to the customers and vendors. So yeah, happy to be here today and always a pleasure to speak to you, sir.
No, that's great. Technology's come such a long way over the years, and technology is something to be used to help businesses grow. And you, before becoming an analyst, which we want to understand how you became an analyst. Me too.
Sure.
I don't even know. I look in the mirror, I'm like, how did I become an analyst? My wife still has no idea what that means. But so you work directly in supply chain operations, and I think supply chain is so unique. What drew you to that field, and what did that experience teach you that shapes how you do your job today?
This was, goes back to when I graduated Rutgers University. I've held previous careers in real estate, construction during my time at university. But post grad, it was an odd time during COVID, and I had some friends I went to high school with that moved down to South Florida. And one of them in particular really provided me with this interesting opportunity to work at the frontline operations of this e-commerce apparel firm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I almost jokingly say it kind of fell in my lap, and where I thought originally was where working kind of in the warehouse, distribution, operations of the business. I quickly then realized how supply chain really was the foundation of how this business and really how most businesses operate, really that have products per se. Mm-hmm. So, and it really opened my mind at this company that everyone really thinks about the product of the brand I worked for was called TLF Apparel. It's a very awesome business. I had a lot of great memories there, a lot of great colleagues I'm still in contact with. But everyone sees that product or brand, but very few people think about what is happening underneath that business, how these products are sourced, procured, stored, packed, shipped, and ultimately delivered to the customers that wear these clothes every single day. So I really had this opportunity to get inside that operation and realize that supply chain is not just one department. It's connected to your finance, your merchandising, procurement, transportation, manufacturing, ultimately the customer experience that we always talk about in every part of the business. So, and that's kind of ties into my approach today, where I'm obviously an analyst in my current life. And that's how I approach our research, right? I ask really the underlying question about not the software itself, but what value are customers getting from it? What are they doing? What is it enabling for them? But I'm super, super fortunate. Long story short.
No, it's great.
I had a very awesome and rich experience for this apparel company, and they gave me an opportunity. I took advantage of a lot of the business was built out, right? It had a great brand, but the supply chain aspect of it really needed to be built out, documenting certain processes. We found how we'll get into some of the stuff, but multi-order picking drove 100% picking efficiencies and packing efficiencies. So we really had an opportunity really to grow that side of the business from the ground up with my manager at the time. I have to give him a shout out if he ever watches this, and I'll make sure he does. He's a director of the operations at TLF. His name's Travis Gonzalez.
Hi, Travis.
Yeah, really great guy. Gave me a lot of opportunities, and we really worked together. And I stay in contact with him today. And I love that experience. And I'm so passionate about it because it has given me the foundation to do what we do right now, Robert, where we are analysts talking to customers of multi-billion-dollar companies, right? There's very few out there, but I'm not going to name any names, but you have opportunities to talk about that. And then we still talk to the vendors, and we have this opportunity where we take a step back in the market. We'll get into it, but that's ultimately how I became an analyst.
Well, But it kind of comes to you when you're not looking, but your expertise was put together because of Travis and the foundation that you were taught, and it resonated with you. My father started an ERP company for the chemical distribution and manufacturing. And when I started there, obviously I had no idea I'd be where I'm at today in this position doing this, but it taught me the math of the industry, meaning the foundation. Yes. So I understand how things are put together. So when they're not put together correctly, I get it. And same with you with supply chain. I think supply chain is one of the biggest areas and maybe misses that companies don't invest in as much as they should, because I believe that there's a lot of inefficiencies happening if you don't have it put together correctly. And many companies, they might want to use it as not as a core module, and they might use outside modules. But the point is, if it's the more you spend, I do think you'll get it back because of the fact of the things that we're going to talk about here. But
100%.
It's so that kind of leads me to a question. Of all the conversations you're having with supply chain leaders, what problems do you think organizations are still underestimating?
I think the biggest thing customers are still underestimating, and topics you and I have harped to each other and vocally as well to the public, is change management, right? I think we see that time and time again. Every customer we talk to, that's something that they wish they had more buy-in from, whether executives or production floor operators or managers, whatever that may be. They wish they got them involved earlier. They underestimated the training, right? All this technology. We're so excited about this new era of technology around AI. And no, we should be, don't get me wrong.
Of course.
But I think organizations are underestimating that the organizational maturity and the change management is so valuable. It's more valuable ever.
It's huge.
So, and it's not technology that's holding back from these companies from really being more mature or going into this next era. It's about this buy-in from your people, right? And we continuously see it, right? Where customers or users, are still hesitant about things. They don't understand that this is a new way of doing things that might be more efficient, right? Because I think people are still in this mindset, because in the supply chain industry, in the industry that we're in, you're talking about dealing with people that have been involved in here for 30, 40 years. So they don't want to change what they're doing because of some young guy coming in there saying, hey, this could be more efficient if we do X, Y, and Z here, and we're adopting this technology. They're going to underestimate it. So
good point. But don't you think that, okay, so let's kind of bottle that up a little bit. Don't you want to put technology in where it's a good fit instead of just putting it in? Meaning, if the processes are good, but I'm missing, I was just talking about this with somebody else. If the processes are good, but I have some gaps, technology should fit those gaps, not change my processes if they're good. When you do put the technology in that changes the processes and it wasn't needed, I think your change management becomes much more substantial and complex. I think it has to be, you don't adopt 30 agents because someone said put in 30 agents if only one fit. Take the one, get rid of the 29. You're looking to enhance your business. Let's call a spade a spade. I'm running a business. I don't have time to screw around to figure out that 29 out of 30 don't work. I need to know what's going to make my business better, make my people more efficient, make me more competitive, and make sure I'm putting in the right change management philosophies and strategies for my supply chain. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think that's when you're building the business case, when you're adopting technology, it's a double-edged sword, right? You don't want to adopt technology for technology's sake.
Yeah,
we're not trying to adopt 38, 100%, right? That's why here at Nucleus, when companies, when we advise them, right, when you're building that business case, let's tackle the 2 to 3 main issues here. Let's not boil the whole ocean. That's another big thing too, right? Let's not try to tackle every issue tonight. Let's figure out the top 1 to 2, maybe 3, or 3 is even pushing it. Let's figure out the top 2. Let's figure out how we can then understand how that's going to increase productivity, drive down costs, and that's going to better improve our business, right? So I think that's where companies, they need to be more diligent, is during that process where you're evaluating new technology, or when you're having conversations with your vendors, really look internally and be like, okay, well, what's really holding us back right now? What are the 2 main issues? And let's start there. So I can completely agree with what you're saying. I think so. I think they need to be a little more, customers need to be a little more diligent heading into, these conversations.
So you worked within the supply chain. Take a step back because I
Sure.
want to know a little bit more about you. You worked in the supply chain. You had a knack for it. You understood it. You get it. It makes sense to you. You're young, and nothing's wrong with that because I'd love to be in your shoes.
Okay.
I think we all would. So how did you decide? Because most analysts have a little bit more time in the industry, or they worked doing something else than they came here. You've kind of not, I wouldn't say leapfrogged us, but in a positive way that shows your experience and your capabilities. What made you decide to be an analyst from what you were doing before, and how'd you land where you are today? And you can take as long as you want or as short as you want.
No, it's a great question. I was presented with another tremendous opportunity. I had a conversation with my now VP, Trevor White. We discussed my experience and how me as a practitioner would be great in the role of an analyst. Graduating university, the role as a technology analyst isn't necessarily talked about a lot.
Nope.
So you don't necessarily know about it, when you're going out in the real world. So hearing about it, it was quite interesting. We talked about the supply chain experience and how they wanted to build that practice out at Nucleus, the company I'm currently working for at the moment. And yeah, it was a very cool opportunity. And I thought it was something that would benefit me. I've always liked the research aspect of it. I've liked to take a step back and talking to customers, understanding businesses out there, and just getting more exposure to things just beyond the e-commerce market. So I think it was something that was presented to me, and I thought it was enticing, and I kind of took the opportunity and ran, and which has led me to conversations like this. And I think my experience has really benefited me when I'm having conversations because, to your point, I understand what they're talking about, and now I expand my horizon maybe to the different contexts of different businesses, whether that's a manufacturer, distributor, other retail organizations, whatever that may be. So I would say that's how I kind of became an analyst. Is someone gave me a call one day, and I picked up and had a good conversation, and they thought I would fit the role well, and they were correct. So
it shows. And it shows, the strategic thinking that you have.
Sure.
That you had it when you worked in the supply chain operations. You have it where you have now. You probably use it when you play tennis. You said you're a great tennis player.
Love tennis.
So, I mean, everybody has to have a strategy when they go play a sport as well, because of the fact, not to, I know it's kind of a wild story, but I was watching UFC fight. Those people are like tough on each other. It was
a chaotic sport, to say the least.
Yeah, it was two women that were fighting, and I was watching it, and my wife and she's like, "Why do you have this on?" I'm like, "Well, because it's on," and it's just, I don't know. It was interesting, but anyway, long story short, this one woman kept on kicking the other woman in like the shin, like the other one would go for the face, and she kicked her, I don't know, like 150 times in the shin. And after a while, she couldn't walk. But the point was that strategy worked to win. And you have to have a strategy in everything you're doing. You can't, and in tennis, you have to have it. In World Cup, the way Spain, the defensiveness and the way that they methodically control the ball against Argentina, strategy in your supply chain operations, how you're going to select your vendors, and I think that's super important. What you're going to do when there's variables to overcome, whether it's logistics, whether it's weather, whether it's tariffs or shortages of raw materials. Do you remember COVID? Just a quick story is I ordered something I had a shirt from H&M, and then I ordered the same shirt in a different color from H&M again. They fit totally different. And the reason why is because of blah, 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 what we're talking about today. It's just very interesting. You can't just go into these with blinders and think it's not going to work out. Your supply chain experience is just a gigantic, experience and can help people. So I don't know, any thoughts on that before I go to the next question?
I think the sports view is very interesting, because you're absolutely correct. It's how you prepare, how you practice going into the actual event is you win the game before you play, right? Today.
That's a great quote. You win the game before it starts.
Yeah, right. And it goes back to that strategy point, right? How are you going to approach it? My colleague Duncan and Alex, we always play tennis, and I'm always joking with them because I'm obviously the supply chain guy within my company, and we're playing tennis, and you may throw a drop shot. Or believe me, I'm no Yannick Sinner or Carlos Alcaraz, but we work hard out here. I'm always joking, right? Hey, you guys got to react to volatility. It's you never know what's going to come at you. So you ultimately have to strategize for the unknown and be nimble there. And that kind of goes back into, the technology really enables that. But how do you prepare as a company, right? It goes back to that change management, knowing what, to do as a company, coming together, strategizing. And that's, so I love the sports analogy because it's completely true. And I think that's completely accurate. And we need to kind of bring that into supply chain and because it's super important. And we're seeing the continued emphasis on the value of being efficient in your supply chain. So,
yeah. I mean, you said I love what you said also is that you win before it starts. Supply chain, you have to do the same thing. And these companies, we've talked about planning and execution becoming one continuous loop.
Yep.
And these companies, the planning and the strategy is such a big deal. By the way, before I ask this question, tennis players have the tenacity of never quitting. And I'm an ex-tennis player. I played competitive my young years, which was a while ago, but I never gave up. I knew if I was down 5-0, I could still come back. 2 sets, I could still come back. Mindset. I know no matter what, if I broke the other person, I could come back and just win a quick set easy. And that's a big deal in business because if you're prepared and your strategy is strong, that you're going to come out on the winning end, you just need to execute. And so looking at all this in practice, where are most of these companies falling short? And we can just talk a little bit about in the supply chain because they're planning and they think they're executing, but where are they falling short where they think that they should be winning?
Right. And I think it ties really into the kind of idea that planning and execution really operates in separate worlds, right? I think that has changed, right? And that's something we've been emphasizing as analysts is that it works together, right? And your supply chain is, at the end of the day, a connected chain and you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? So if one part of your supply chain is weak, it's going to affect it, right? Your manufacturing at the end of the day affects your warehousing and warehousing affects transportation. So that's ultimately when we're talking to customers and we work with vendors, right? Is ultimately, right? Obviously not every customer is there yet and they need to understand that and that there's a certain level of change that needs to happen from a physical supply chain sense within companies that takes time, right? And it's easy for us as analysts to talk about it. But I think it's having that understanding that your supply chain is connected, that it is an executive level conversation. You need to understand that everything is really stringent on your supply chain, how you can be more aggressive and more agile there. It will drive benefits in your bottom line, in your whatever that may be. So I think it's something that customers are working on. Vendors are pushing, and we're talking about it obviously as analysts, but it does go back down to customers understanding that the physical change and the understanding of this new way of doing things interconnected, that mantra, it takes time. And that's where we need to continuously educate them and really help them get to this next stage. But I think that ties into how vendors really need to be more of consultants, right? It's no longer selling products to your customers. You are driving value for them. Show them how you can then bring them into this new era of operating, how you connect your planning and execution. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So we're putting a lot of emphasis on it.
I think it's and I'm going to talk a little bit about AI in a second, but I think it's an operational transformation.
Yeah.
Meaning you're connecting. We're not necessarily doing an ERP transformation. We're changing our operations with AI, ERP, supply chain, data, and security. So that's the new transformation because I'm asking you to change your operation. So it's not just about putting a new ERP system in, about everything that I just mentioned. And I think that that's apropos. And it's about the platform and the ecosystems, and AI is receiving a lot of attention across the supply chain. So where is so when we talk about that operational transformation, we talk about AI, because everybody else is, so why can't we? So where is it helping the planners make the better decisions, and where's the industry getting ahead of itself? Because AI is definitely a topic. It absolutely can be a helpful efficiency and a competitive advantage within the supply chain. Where are you seeing it get ahead of itself right now?
Sure. And this is a great question. And you're really giving me an opportunity to, educate the broader audience, because there's a lot of blended marketing going on in the space, right? When we hear AI, it's kind of like this blanketed topic, but there's different flavors of it, right? There's areas like machine learning, optimization, solvers. They've been around driving value for planners for years, right? Whether that's demand forecasters, inventory managers, helping with things like anomaly detection, predictive planning, stuff of that nature. But where we are today, is like this generative AI and agentic AI space, where generative AI now, or we have seen driving, potential value for users, is helping them be more productive by showcasing summarized information or explaining what is currently happening in your supply chain, getting certain recommendations, and then ultimately allowing them to take action and really making these complex planning systems more easy to use for these end users.
Good point.
That's another aspect of it as well, because you got this new age of people coming into the workforce. They want to take advantage of these capabilities that they are already using commercially through the Claudes, OpenAIs, whatever, Groks of the world.
They should.
Yes.
They should. I mean, this is to make your business better, to make you do more with the same, to grow, to manufacturing. I wouldn't say it's down, but costs are up. So since the costs are up, where do I look? Do I look at cutting? Do I want to cut people? Do I want to cut expenses? Do I want to cut this or that? Or do I want to figure out how I can be more efficient with the same amount of people so I can grow?
100%. And that's an excellent point there, because when you can now understand what has happened and what you can do in the future, you can see where you're already leaking value, right? You can understand that, hey, maybe we're already throwing out a broad number here. We're losing $10 million doing X, Y, and Z, right? If we're more efficient here, right? If we want to cut down our costs, like I said back before, tying into that financial aspect, supply chains being that main enabler of your financial efficiency and value there, how can we drive value there? Understanding what has happened, tying that back into sports, right? What's that post-game analysis? What did we do wrong? What can we do better in the future? So that is very important. But I think then the other flavor is this agentic AI, which is incredibly exciting, which has really driven this blanketed AI marketing as of late, the past 12 months, especially generative AI more past 24 months. But I think organizations really aren't ready to hand over these critical supply chain decisions, or even some non-critical ones, to these autonomous agents. So I think right now the greatest value we've seen is through this generative, from the new era of AI particularly, is from these recommendations, understanding what has happened. But this next era is the simulation, right? Doing these autonomous actions as well. So, but it goes back to, customers actually adopting these tools. It's great. It's the acceleration from the technology sense has been incredible, but are users necessarily taking advantage of it at this moment? It's not as grand as maybe what we're seeing from a marketing perspective here, but there's a lot of momentum. I said
it depends. It depends where they're at with evaluating their supply chain.
Yes.
Meaning, some companies might outsource all their trucks.
Yes.
Right? They might not do any of their distribution. So, or they might own, I don't know, 300 trucks. They might handle it different. They might drop ship everything from different warehouses. I mean, you have to look at what's best for you. And then some companies have the whole carte blanche, and they do it all inside, because they have a big business, where this is where the supply chain, depending on the company, but that example is critical, that they have the right supply chain software and they're efficient, and and there's a lot going on. So you have tariffs, you have disruptions with uncertainty, you have companies, how they should balance their efficiency and what's the cost of that, and then resilience, without simplicity of adding more inventory. How do these companies adapt to all these disruptions that are going on in the supply chain without adding more software or adding more product or employees? I mean, what's the best way to handle these things? I don't know if that's a good question or not, but
no, it's an excellent question. And you mentioned an area such as inventory, right? So years ago, resilience often meant buying more inventory, right? And today, what we're seeing and where the more mature companies are heading to, it's about making decisions faster, right? So where you don't have to necessarily buy more inventory, right? You understanding, right? It goes back to connecting your supply chain. Right? You might have a warehouse somewhere else that might have inventory that can fulfill a customer order, right? But you didn't have the visibility to that years ago, right? So you would just buy more inventory for a certain warehouse or distribution center, right? So now
buying it off of the cuff, though, you're buying it based upon somebody thinking that you need that.
Well, it ties back into sales, right? Ties back into that being so tied to supply chain as well, where they're giving these forecasts to your, or your supply chain organization saying, hey, we have a demand for this and we know customers are going to buy X, Y, and Z. And oftentimes that doesn't happen. Right?
We think they're going to buy.
Yeah, right. And nothing's ever guaranteed in life, right?
Sure.
It could be more than what they're forecasting. Or oftentimes when we see it, it's typically less, right? They have these high expectations, which is great, but oftentimes it's not necessarily fulfilled. So, but now we're customers and where it ties back into, you think about the Snowflake, the Databricks of the world, where now customers have this opportunity to really connect all their data sources and get external data sources, things like supplier performance, geopolitical events, constraints from your transportation, demand from customers, whether that's tariff information, how you pull this information together and you get the signal so that you can make better decisions around sourcing or inventory decisions before they become expensive, right? So you're not just buying things off the cuff, like you mentioned, right? So it's often like, it increases visibility, and it often means you don't need to dramatically increase your inventory, right? You're simply making better decisions with what you already have because you've already planned better, because you have access to that information. But we're talking about this from a high level. It's easier said than done. But in essence, this is how companies should be thinking, right?
Sure. Well, in the past, it was done manually. Now we're talking about it done from an agentic AI perspective and action versus a system of record. So you're going to control your inventory based upon supply, demand, cross-sell, and then you're going to make adjustments based upon the tariffs, the weather, the cost that you might have. If there's a sale at a company and they have more inventory than they need, there's a problem. And that's when you walk in a place and they have that, that's because they they probably overestimated. And if they run out of something, they underestimated. And this is where AI, it will make a gigantic difference. And that's where you want to be. It's not a scary thing. It's an amazing component to actually drive success, and I'm excited about that at the end of the day. So what the tariffs and things in the future, do you see the supply chain operations getting easier or harder, or not changing for a while?
No, I think it's ultimately going to get more complex, more challenging. I think those that have this notion now that, all right, hey, we had the COVID, I think emphasis around supply chain almost died a little bit, and then the tariffs and all that craziness happened. And obviously recently with the Strait of Hormuz, all the closing there, this has really reemphasized the value of being supply chain first. So I think really it ties into everything.
We talked about tennis. Tennis is a big deal. It's always fun to talk about sports, but you were also active in lacrosse. Are these lessons from the sports, around preparation, teamwork, or responding in the moment? Do you think those affect, the way that you think about your life strategy, supply chain, and how do you think that influences you when you plan and execute with your job?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is when I think about sports and bringing that energy to supply chain, it's really about being aggressive and working hard. And we mentioned earlier about studying film, all of that. That's super important because, when you understand, going back to the practicing, when you understand where maybe you're lacking skills or where you can improve, you can go out there and be a better player, whether that's in lacrosse, because film is very, very important in that sport, obviously very much in tennis. So understanding where you're maybe lacking, being real with yourself there, that goes back to supply chain, understanding where you are, maybe in maturity, right? let's benchmark ourselves. Let's understand where we're necessarily behind and see where we can then go ahead there. That ties back to ego, right? And looking at yourself in the mirror and being like, okay, maybe I as good as I think I am. I need to improve at X, Y, and Z. So that's really my mindset with sports there, is I'm always trying to improve. I'm always trying to go out there and put in the effort that maybe someone else isn't willing to put in. And that should be how organizations should be thinking about supply chain. Let's put some more effort there. Let's put more resources. Let's understand how we can be better at our supply chain and how it's going to drive more value for our business there. And things like some vendors in particular have done a good job at providing some AI capabilities that are almost like this post-game analyzer, where they had that sports view to it. And I think bringing that to supply chain is good. And I think ultimately the biggest lesson is, be aggressive, understand that you can always improve, and you should never think you're at your peak. You're always trying to work towards getting to that next level. So that's my lessons learned to it when I'm always advising customers or just in general. How can we get better today? 1% better today.
I like that, for the notion that you can always improve. You never stop learning. How do I get better? What more technology can I use? How do I get my serve better in tennis, or how do I get a step ahead in whatever lacrosse, whatever sport? You can look at some of the people that have been in sports for a long time, and why are they more successful than some of the younger folks? They might not be faster. They might not know how to kick the ball as far or hit the tennis ball is good, but somehow they win because they know what to do. In business, same thing. Supply chain is a way to constructively enhance your business. And some of the tools that you mentioned today and some of the features that AI brings are, I think, game changers.
Yeah, 100%. But I think it goes into this new way of thinking, and customers really need to assess where they currently are and really need to look at themselves in the mirror and think, hey, how can we get better? So it's having some tough conversations, but that's what we're here for. And then that's why we love what we do. And we continue to deepen our expertise and try to help the vendors, and more importantly, the customers, get into this next era of transformation, right? I think you've coined it best, right? That's this industry 5.0, right? It's this kind of next era of thinking, and customers need to understand what they need to do internally to get there. So
well said.
Yeah, we're in a good spot right now, Robert. So it's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you, sir. Charles Brennan, Robert Kramer, Kramer Talk. We'll see everybody next time. Thank you for joining.
All right, take care.